this on to the...
No, just this one. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dr. Dave Thompson, a volunteer at the Air Museum here in California, the Palm Springs Air Museum. And today is 3 January, the year 2000. Thompson, a volunteer at the Air Museum here in California, the Palm Springs Air Museum. And today is 3 January, the year 2004. As part of our Veterans History Project of the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., we conduct interviews of veterans and civilians who participated in our country's military conflicts. Today, I'm here at the museum along with fellow volunteers Bob Andrade and Dr. Marvin Leaf, and special guest, Mr. Uchida's wife, daughter, and son-in-law. Today, we have the honor and the privilege of interviewing Roy Uchida. Mr. Uchida was born in America, but went to visit his father in Japan, who was ill, in 1936, and was taken into the Japanese Imperial Army in 1943. So Bob Andrade here is going to talk to him about that and a lot of other things. Mr. Uchida, nice to have you here. Thank you very much. Why don't you tell us when you were born and where that was?
I was born in Los Angeles on November 28, 1921.
Okay, going back a little bit into the history there, can you know when your family first came from Japan, what year?
Was about a little past 1900s. My father came, and my mother came over 1920, I guess, just before.
She came over here, he didn't go over there.
No, they got married with picture bride. So,
Yeah.
Let's pause for just 1 second.
Okay, I know the migration, according to history, is about 1904 when the migration really started into Hawaii and into California. And that's when, of course, we had with the Ishi first, the first generation. And, of course, we all know about the Exclusion Act, I think the Exclusion Act in 1926, which made that the first generation could not own property. And do you recall any of that in the family? Were you talking about that as you were growing up?
no, I have no idea.
Okay, because that was it's called the Exclusion Act, and so that meant that you, as the son, you had more rights. You actually had the rights of the United States, where your parents did not have the rights, and you could own property, and they could not. That's the way this history goes. Okay, back to you now. You were brought up in Los Angeles, and did you know very much about your mother's family at all?
Oh no, not much. Very English.
And say probably the same with your father.
Yes.
And did they ever say at any time why they came to the United States? You just took it for granted.
Just to make a few bucks and retire in Japan. That's what I heard.
Okay, that was one of the good reasons.
Yes.
Okay, and so then you went to usually you went to school at what school did you go to? Your elementary school and.
It was over here, Solano Avenue School. That's close to Dodger Stadium there.
Close to Dodger Stadium. Okay. And you probably went to high school there?
No, went to Avenue 21 School after graduation of the great grammar school. Then from there went to Japan to the
Then
middle
you didn't
school.
go to high school here then?
No.
Okay.
And went to middle school in Japan. 1939, or was it 40? Was it almost drafted, so I extended the draft there. Went to from the middle school to university, and in 1948, 43, I mean, they finally got every one of us into the army.
No exemptions up there.
That's right.
Now, when you were when you first went over there, where you were going to get your education there, which a lot of the people did. Now, but a lot of them came back after their education, came back to the United States. Was that your intention? Was to come back and to your family?
No, the whole family was in Japan.
Oh,
so-
okay.
And I didn't think about coming back here.
Okay, I see. Okay. So that you got nothing started in your family, then you went to live in Japan. Then?
Yes. Main purpose was education.
Okay. Now, how did you feel personally? I mean, you were just naturally you were disciplined and loyal. How did you feel being an American and going over there? Did you feel comfortable, or was there that little feeling of missing America?
Well, the language was very difficult. That's what made it different than the Japanese people there. So I had a hard time learning the Japanese language.
Was that right?
Yes.
Was it dialect type, or is it just that you never spoke Japanese?
Never spoke Japanese over here.
Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, because usually what would happen is that as you grew up, they would send you to a Japanese school to keep the customs and the language going, but
Yeah.
they didn't force you to do that then. In Los Angeles.
My parents sort of got me into the Japanese school. Every 1 hour every day, the bus would pick us up and
Yeah.
take us to school. And after school, they'd return us to home.
Right. I noticed in my studies that most of your Nisi had Anglo first names. Was that dominant, or was that just?
No, I picked up the name Roy after coming over.
Oh, okay.
Yes, from the beginning, only the Japanese name, Setsuo Uchida.
Oh, okay. So now, now you're in Japan, and now, did you have any? All these questions are, things that people want to hear. Okay, so if I ask something that sounds awkward, that's the reason. Okay, I mean, I'm asking you because I'm curious. Okay, now, as a young man, how did you feel? Could you feel the war coming on from over there? Did the populace and yourself feel that there was going to be a war? I'm talking back in 37 or 38.
No, I never heard of the war coming.
Okay, so then when it got close to 41, then you probably must have felt at about 41, the diplomatic relations stuff falling apart.
That's right. Yes.
Negotiations were actually had you up against a wall. I had Japan up against a wall
Yes.
at that time.
Yes.
Okay, and then so now the war's on now, and you say that you were they try to draft you earlier, right?
Yes.
In what, 41?
Yes, 41. 40 or 41, I think. My age. And
You have an exemption?
yeah, at that time, I had it, but in 1943, they got everyone.
They got everything by 1943. I would guess so. Then you were drafted, and you were put in. I understand you're put in the artillery.
Yes, and first week went off to Central China.
Wow, Central China, was that okay? By Central China, because you already had Shanghai and
Yes, all
moving,
that.
and it goes. Kunming is in southern China, right? I mean, kind of southern China. Kunming and Yunnan province is in kind of a
Yes.
south, isn't it? So you're kind of a little bit north of
Wait,
that then?
Yes. Then, the examination for officers training, they had it in central China. And then, as I passed, I went over to the school in Manchuria.
Uh-huh.
And,
They had a school in Manchuria then?
yes,
It was still artillery?
yes,
And,
it was mainly, what you call cavalry.
uh-huh. Now, we had another gentleman here a few months ago that was in Manchuria also, except he was in the aviation because I guess in '44, I guess the Allies or the Americans controlled the sky over Japan, so the training had to be done in Manchuria. That was far enough. So there was a lot of those. Was there any air raids that were? I'm not by artillery. You're not talking anti-aircraft. You're talking ground artillery.
Ground. So, never heard of no air raids there.
Yeah.
It was out of Harbin, a few miles south of Harbin.
Uh-huh. And so it's just
No air raids or nothing, no big cities.
Manchuria is pretty cold up there, wasn't it? Manchuria?
Very cold, yes. But not as cold as Siberia.
A little bit higher. Okay. Now, was there a lot of? Did you also listen to any of the news? What was going on? Did you get the news and what was happening someplace else? What was what I'm trying to say is that a lot of times in military, no matter what country, they kind of withhold news.
Yes.
Especially when you lose a battle or something like that.
Well, when Germany surrendered, then we heard that all the Russians were coming towards
Oh, okay.
Manchuria, and no freight cars or nothing going back, just coming.
Uh-huh. So you knew that they were massing then,
Yes.
right? Because you do know that the Russians had a treaty with Japan, I think April of 1941, non-aggression
Yes.
treaty with Japan, and so they at that time they were holding on to the treaty,
That's right.
and so then but you didn't trust them. They,
So when they started coming, then we drew back all the forces to central Manchuria.
but you knew the Russians eventually were gonna
Yes.
come over. Yeah, I think. Okay, and okay, so now you're up there. Now, did you see very much action there up there, in Manchuria? Wasn't very much stuff up there, was there? Or
No, hardly any arms there. They all went to Okinawa, Iwo Jima,
okay,
so hardly any arms. Just the big artillery along the borderline.
like defensive.
Yes. Because they couldn't move those.
Yeah, you were 105s or bigger than that, huh?
They're 18 inches.
18-inch guns.
Yes.
Wow,
along
those-
the border.
Those are big ones.
Yes.
That's what they had. The biggest battleships had those.
That's right.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of the Yamato, the battleship Yamato? Had 19-inch guns. Yes. Now, those are big. You couldn't move those around. They did. I was on Wake Island, and they did have some like 105s, from the Jeffries 105s there.
Yes.
You can move the 105 around.
Yes.
But 18 inches,
Okay.
and I could move that around. It probably took a rail and everything else to keep it up. And what? No, being an officer, how many would they? As an officer, how many guns were you responsible for? Would it take just one gun, and you had a crew?
Just one gun there.
how many men would take to man it? That's a big gun.
We were in charge of the 75 millimeter artillery, field artillery.
75 wasn't very.
No, drawn by 6 horses.
Uh-huh. You had horse drawn, huh?
Yes.
Now the forces, of course, we had the were they it was strictly Chinese forces that you were fighting? Chinese and Americans, or
No, just I guess they were ready to ship him out to the islands, but
actually it was more or less a holding action than
Yes.
because you know the whole idea of Chris, if you in the history, the whole idea of keeping China in the war was so that you wouldn't that they wouldn't reinforce the islands. That was
Yes.
one of the biggest reasons for keeping
That-
China in the war.
while I was in there, I heard that 80% was sunk by the submarines.
Is that right?
All the men and equipment going to the islands. 80%.
80%. That was probably what at that time. That was probably 44 then, wasn't it? By the time that
Yes.
but say late in 44 on, I mean, the shipping was. I mean, the submarines couldn't find any ships to sink anymore. Yeah, they sunk a lot of those ships there, and by that time, I guess. Now back again to your news. Did you know that what was happening in the islands? Did you ever hear of what was the first? Of course, the Philippines. You probably knew that was taken finally. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And then after the Philippines, I guess what was that, the Marianas, I think. The Marianas. And eventually, I think the big thing would be probably Okinawa would be the big, because that was the homeland now.
Yes.
And were you kept abreast of what was happening? Or did you just get
No,
fragmentations of...
Just a little, not much. What was going on?
They try to keep the morale up.
Yes.
So then the war has progressed to the point of course, naturally it was Iwo Jima, and that was really not at the homeland as much as Okinawa. Okinawa was that's where they. I'll ask you a big question here. Did you ever hear about the kamikazes? Did you know about that?
Yes, they've been telling us about all the casualty they caused. That's
Yeah, because the kamikaze first appeared in the Battle of Leyte, the Battle of Leyte, and Oshini, I think was Admiral Oshini started the kamikazes in the Philippines, and then by the time they got to Okinawa, it was pretty much pretty much in force.
so. It was in 1940. I told my uncle that I'd like to volunteer into the Navy, the kamikaze. He didn't say it was kamikaze, but he said no ways.
Yeah.
It's all
Well,
suicide.
yeah, that the whole but still, you must have still had a little bit of being an American. You still must have had, your thinking is probably a little bit different, isn't it? Because you're thinking of so many of the Japanese soldiers were the emperor, and
That's right.
it was so
That's right.
it was so embedded in them that you're out there to die and not to live.
That's right.
And it would be the thinking when you were a child in Japan, but your formable years had already been formed. Are you with what I'm trying to say?
Yes.
Is that you weren't part of that culture, because your culture was American up until that
Yes.
age. So I can't see I'm talking about the mindset. And did you see that mindset over there about dying for the emperor? I mean, was it evident about about dying for the emperor. And,
Yes, they brainwashed us
okay, that's
with
that's what it was continual. In fact, the
Yes.
civilians I think were brainwashed too.
Yes,
in
that's
that
right.
too.
Yes.
And it was really continual. And of course, I'm just guessing, that because I'm into culture. Okay, so I can just picture the your mindset being a little bit different,
Yes,
and you not accepting it as much as the next
Yes, that's right.
the next person. That's the way I'm just guessing that. Okay, so now now the war is actually coming to an end now, and of course you remember the Japanese forces were still pretty heavy in Burma. They're still a lot in Missionah and all those places that were pretty heavy in Burma. Did you have any of your stuff go over to Burma?
Yes.
Okay, because there's a theory there that if the Japanese could have gone across Burma into India, then they would have linked up with the Hindus that was already revolted against the British in India. So that was why the big battle. So, but up there where you were at, it was more or less a holding action. So you really didn't get the heavy
No,
stuff.
no.
And thank God. Okay, now the war is coming kind of close to an end now, and are you beginning to feel it here? It's now 45, and Okinawa. Did you know Okinawa was taken? Were you given that information?
No, nothing about Okinawa.
That you didn't know Okinawa was taken, because it was very embarrassing too. Their homeland to be taken.
Yes.
And of course we all know that more American Navy was killed during Okinawa than the whole war, just because of the kamikazes. And okay, now the war is coming to an end. And at what point did you personally feel that, hey, it's almost over? Did you have that feeling that it's almost over? Could you feel it being almost over, or do you think it's just going to end out in death, or do you have feelings about that?
Just the Russians came in, and then
That's right.
we heard about the Japanese surrendering.
Okay. In other words, now did you? Now the last person I talked to, they did know about the Hiroshima. Did you know about that? Did you hear about it real quick, or?
No, actually we didn't hear about the bomb
So after the Russians probably, yeah.
about 6 months later.
Is that right?
Yes.
Wow. That's something. Okay, so then the two bombs had already been dropped, and finally, of course, there was problems in Tokyo. You had your people that wanted to do the mass, you had a group there that were trying to prevent the emperor radio broadcast. You hear about that?
No.
Okay, well, they didn't want the emperor to announce the war was over. They wanted to keep fighting, and that's mass suicide.
Yeah.
And eventually, it's supposed to be a true story. They try to prevent that broadcast, and then finally, I think, forget what year was that? I don't know what month was that. I forget that when he finally went on the radio. Was it December the 12th or something like that? Where the emperor went on the radio, and nobody had ever heard his voice before. And of course, you were still. Were you captured, by the way? Did you have to surrender to the Russians?
Yes.
Okay, now there's another big question: is the Russians were known for, when somebody surrendered, they put them in labor camps. Did you escape that?
Yes. I was lucky. I was an officer, so I escaped that.
Okay, but they did haul
Yes.
some off to the labor camps.
Oh, in Siberia.
Yeah.
That's where they used all
labor,
for labor.
slave labor.
Yes.
Yeah, because they did that all through Europe, all into Siberia. And I was very curious. I'm glad you mentioned that because I wondered about that. But being an officer, you got treated a little bit better then, huh?
Big part.
Being an officer,
Yes.
you escaped the deportation then to the camps then.
That's right. So,
Wow.
there were 500,000 POWs.
Yeah, that was a lot.
And I think about half of them died in Siberia.
That was about the average, about half the people up there. Okay, then when were you repatriated back to Japan?
Uh,
Did the Russians give you accommodations to Japan, or did you have to find a way of getting back?
no, they just told us we're going home to Japan,
Uh-huh.
and we moved to the station and then got on and came back east. Going to Europe, POW camp, it said, we're going to Japan. Every morning I looked out and we're going west.
Oh, yeah, is that right? You weren't going east.
No. It was going the opposite
The sun was
way.
on the wrong spot, huh? Okay, then where did you get repatriated at then?
Trans-Siberian Railroad ends at Naotka, and from there got on the ship there
Uh-huh.
to Hokkaido and returned.
Then you got home.
And on that ship, boarding the ship, I think it was a lot of information that the Americans wanted. And
At that time, we started the Cold War.
yes, already started.
That's something just that was sad. I was very young, and I had no idea that about the Cold War until the late 40s. Okay, so then you were probably interrogated by the Americans then.
Yes,
Okay.
every information that they wanted.
But how many troops were up there? The Russian troops.
Or did you see them? Or did you see the airplanes and all that?
Oh, wow, that's all intelligence information.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. So now you're home. I neglected to ask you at the very beginning, but I'll ask you now. At what point did you meet your wife? And through all of this, did you know her during the war?
No.
You were undoubtedly you were single, but
Yes.
okay. Okay. The war's over now, and you're repatriated back to Japan. You're back at your hometown again.
Hiroshima.
And, yeah, you were from Hiroshima. That was a shock, wasn't it? To see that for the first time like that.
That's right.
Wow, that must have been. Now, at this point, if there's anybody that wants to ask any questions, come up here because we don't have a mic here. If anybody wants to ask any questions, they can come up here closer. Okay, then then that must have been a very devastating thing to see your home like that, and the recuperation of that period must have been horrible.
So that's the first time I found out my mother died.
Did she die in the raid?
Atomic bomb.
She died of the atomic bomb, huh?
Yes.
And how about the other part of the family there?
My brother was in the Japanese army, stationed in Japan.
But not in that area. Wow. Okay, and now you had to reestablish your life again. I guess there's one thing that a lot of people don't know. The American Japanese, the Nisi here in the United States, were told to sign a loyalty oath. I don't know if you ever heard about that in the camps. And if they didn't sign it, a lot were mad, and stuff.